There's a moment in your life, usually when the world finally quiets down, when you look at yourself, not the version you show others, not the persona you maintain, not the identity you perform, and you feel something you've been trying to outrun for years. A heaviness, a pressure, a silent panic. That quiet, desperate whisper that says, no matter what I do, it's never enough. You don't say it out loud because you've learned that the world rewards confidence, not confession. You don't admit it to anyone because you've spent your entire life trying to convince people you're capable, composed, in control. But late at night, or early in the morning, or during those strange in-between moments when your guard drops, the truth slips through. You measure yourself constantly. You criticize yourself relentlessly. You push yourself endlessly. And deep down you believe that if you could just improve a little more, achieve a little more, work a little harder, fix one more flaw, then maybe you'd finally feel worthy. But you never do. And the painful truth is this: you don't struggle with self-improvement. You struggle with self-worth. Because somewhere along the way, you learned that being yourself was not enough. Not loud enough, not talented enough, not successful enough, not attractive enough, not disciplined enough, not impressive enough. And instead of questioning the origin of that belief, you turned it into a lifestyle, a lifelong project of fixing yourself, upgrading yourself, reinventing yourself in the hopes of finally earning the feeling you've been chasing since childhood. I am enough. But here's the part no one warns you about. When you learn that your value must be earned, you can chase self-improvement for the rest of your life and still feel empty. Because the problem isn't who you are. The problem is who you learned you had to be. Think about it. A child doesn't wake up one day and decide they learn it through tone, through silence, through comparison, through subtle disappointments, through the moments when approval was given only when they performed, through the sighs of frustration, through the absence of reassurance, through the constant feeling of almost making someone proud, but not quite. A child doesn't need direct criticism to internalize inadequacy. They only need inconsistency. They only need a parent whose love felt like something to earn. They only need a world that rewarded perfection and punished authenticity. And once that belief settles in, it becomes the lens through which you see everything. Every accomplishment minimized, every flaw magnified, every moment graded. So you grow up believing that rest is laziness, mistakes are shameful, and slowing down is dangerous. You believe you must constantly evolve because stagnation feels like failure. Your entire identity becomes built around the silent fear that if you stop improving, people will see the real you and reject Italiano. And that's why you don't feel enough. Because the version of enough you're chasing was built by someone else's expectations. People think self-improvement is about growth, but for many, it's about escape. Escape from the feeling of inadequacy. Escape from the echo of a childhood where achievements mattered more than emotions. Escape from the fear that you have no inherent worth without proving it. Escape from the belief that you must constantly justify your existence. And so you push yourself. You read more books, you set more goals, you optimize your routines, you track your progress, you fix every flaw. You try to perfect everything: the way you speak, the way you look, the way you work, the way you show up in relationships, and everyone around you admires you. They tell you you're disciplined, driven, inspiring, but they don't know the truth. They don't know you're not improving out of love. You're improving out of fear. Fear of slowing down, fear of being average, fear of being seen without your accomplishments, fear of facing the part of you that still feels small. And the cruelest part, the more you improve, the less enough you feel. Because the finish line keeps moving. It moves every time you achieve something. It moves every time you prove yourself. It moves every time you get close to feeling worthy. And suddenly there's a new flaw to fix, a new goal to chase, a new standard to meet. Worthiness stays just out of reach, like a horizon that keeps stretching as you walk toward it. And one day you realize you've built a life based on constantly trying to earn what should have been unconditional. You've built an identity based on never feeling complete. You've become addicted to chasing the feeling of adequacy, not because you're weak, but because the world taught you that enoughness is something to pursue, not something to remember. But let me tell you something, and maybe it will land somewhere deep. The belief that you were not enough didn't start with you. It was given to you, conditioned into you, inherited by you. And because it didn't start with you, it can end with you, but only if you begin to question it. Because what if your lifelong project of self-improvement is actually self-punishment in disguise? What if your perfectionism is unhealed insecurity wearing productivity as armor? What if the reason nothing ever feels like enough is because the person you're trying to satisfy doesn't exist? They're a ghost, a memory, a reflection of the people you once feared disappointing. And here's where most people get it wrong. Healing doesn't begin when you achieve more. Healing begins when you finally stop trying to prove yourself. When you pause long enough to ask, who am I trying to impress? And why do I believe their approval determines my worth? When you see that the voice telling you you're not enough isn't your voice, it's an echo, an imprint, a leftover survival mechanism. And once you recognize it, something inside you shifts. Not dramatically, but gently. You begin to see that the endless striving was never about becoming better. It was about feeling safe. Safe from judgment, safe from rejection, safe from disappointment, safe from the fear of being truly seen. Because the truth is, you don't want to be perfect. You want to be accepted. You don't want to be impressive. You want to be enough. You don't want to be endlessly improving. You want to stop feeling like a project. You want to be allowed to exist without constantly earning your right to be here. And maybe this is the first time anyone is telling you, you were enough before you started trying. You were enough when you were messy. You were enough when you were lost. You were enough when you were imperfect. You were enough without accomplishments. You were enough without striving. You were enough before the world taught you to doubt it. You don't heal by becoming more. You heal by remembering who you were before you learned you had to be more. And when that remembering begins slowly, quietly, gently, you start to breathe differently. You start to soften. You start to question the goals you once worshipped. You start to release the version of yourself built by fear. You start to replace improvement with understanding. You start to become the person you needed when you were younger. And in that moment, you realize the truth you've been running from your entire life. You were never inadequate. You were simply taught to believe you were. And that belief ends with you. There comes a moment, usually not dramatic, usually not loud, when you confront the exhaustion that has been living inside you for years. The exhaustion of constantly trying to become someone you hope will finally feel worthy. The exhaustion of being at war with yourself without even realizing it. The exhaustion of waking up every day and immediately preparing to defend yourself from a judgment no one is actually making. That exhaustion is not physical. It's emotional. It's the fatigue of never feeling enough. And when that exhaustion becomes undeniable, when even your accomplishments stop numbing it, you finally notice the truth you've been too busy to face. You've been trying to outrun a feeling that cannot be outrun. You've been building a life based on an emotional debt you never actually owed. You've been chasing enoughness as if it were a location rather than a state of being. You've been trying to solve a problem that was never yours to solve. Because inadequacy didn't begin as a belief. It began as an atmosphere, a mood, a tone, one you were raised inside of. Maybe your parents praised achievement but not effort. Maybe you were compared to siblings who seemed to succeed effortlessly. Maybe you were criticized in ways that looked harmless, but felt like subtle proof that who you were was not quite acceptable. Maybe affection was inconsistent, so you associated love with performance. Maybe approval was given and dosage small enough to keep you hungry, big enough to keep you chasing. Maybe you learned that disappointment was dangerous, so you tried to outrun it your entire life. Whatever the cause, the effect was the same. You learned to measure your worth in tiny, painful ways. The tone of someone's voice, the speed of their replies, the expression on their face, the silence in a room, the comparison in a conversation, the slightest hint of disapproval, the smallest sign of withdrawal. You learned to scan for these things constantly, like a radar searching for threats. That radar never turned off, and so you grew up believing that self-worth is unstable, fragile, something that can be lost at any moment, unless you continuously earn it. That belief shaped how you treat yourself now, the way you triple-check your words, the way you explain yourself more than necessary, the way you apologize for existing, the way you overthink every decision, the way you quietly punish yourself when you fall short, the way you feel guilty when you rest, the way you can't accept compliments without discomfort, the way you believe your efforts are expected, not appreciated, the way you assume people tolerate you rather than value you, the way you avoid being truly seen because being truly seen feels dangerous. These are not personality traits. These are survival strategies. Strategies you learned before you knew they were strategies. And here's the paradox. You think self-improvement will save you from this? You think if you just become better, smarter, stronger, more disciplined, more successful, more productive, then finally, the feeling of not being enough will dissolve. But it doesn't, it gets worse. Because as long as your improvement is fueled by fear instead of desire, the finish line will always move, and whispering beneath all your achievements, accomplishments, And milestones is a question you've been terrified to answer. What if no amount of improvement will make me feel enough? And that question hurts because deep down, a part of you already knows the answer. You don't feel enough because your self-worth is conditional. It's conditional on performance, conditional on how much you produce, conditional on how well you behave, conditional on how little you inconvenience others, conditional on how much you can carry without breaking, conditional on how perfect you can appear, conditional on how much of yourself you can sacrifice without being noticed. You treat yourself like a project because the world taught you that being a person wasn't acceptable unless you were constantly becoming a better one. But there is a truth waiting for you quietly, patiently, beneath all your striving. A truth most people never realize because they are too busy trying to earn a worth they already have. The truth is this: you do not feel enough because you have never lived a life where being enough was allowed. That's it. That's the entire wound. Not a defect, a lack of permission. No one showed you how to rest without guilt. No one taught you how to exist without performing. No one taught you how to feel without justifying. No one taught you how to speak without rehearsing. No one taught you how to receive love without questioning it. No one taught you how to believe you are worthy simply because you exist. So you learn to confuse exhaustion with achievement. You learn to confuse self-erasure with discipline. You learn to confuse perfection with safety. You learned to confuse productivity with purpose. You learn to confuse busyness with value. You learn to confuse emotional numbness with strength. And now, as an adult, you live in a world that celebrates these exact wounds. A world that rewards burnout. A world that romanticizes self-sacrifice. A world that glorifies never resting. A world that praises improvement even when it comes from self. A world that tells you being enough is a destination you must earn. But listen please, because this part matters. You were not born believing you weren't enough. You were taught to feel that way. And because it was taught, it can be unlearned. And you unlearn it not by achieving more, but by finally stopping long enough to see the truth. You are not responsible for becoming someone worthy. You are responsible for remembering that you already are. You are not broken. You are not deficient. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are not less than. You are not unworthy. You are simply someone who spent their entire life trying to earn what should have been unconditional. So here is the shift. Not the dramatic one. Not the kind that happens overnight, but the kind that happens the same way inadequacy was built, slowly, quietly, repeatedly. You begin by noticing the voice inside you that says, "You're not enough unless," and instead of obeying it, you question it. Instead of running from it, you listen to it. Instead of believing it, you ask where it came from. And slowly you realize that voice isn't your enemy. It's a younger part of you, a scared part, an unvalidated part, an unheard part, still waiting for reassurance. You don't silence that voice with achievement. You silence it with compassion. Because self-improvement won't fix a wound created by lack of love. Only connection will. Only gentleness will. Only self-acceptance will. And the moment you give yourself what you've been trying to earn, patience, forgiveness, understanding, permission, something extraordinary happens. The pressure dissolves. The striving softens. The pane quiets. The endless hunger fades. The finish line stops moving. And gradually, you begin to feel something that once seemed impossible. Enough. Not perfect. Not impressive. Not flawless. Just enough. And enough becomes the foundation for everything else. The relationships you build, the choices you make, the dreams you pursue, the life you create. Because when you finally feel enough, you don't improve to earn worth. You improve because you're curious, because you're inspired, because you're alive, because growth feels like expansion, not desperation. Self-improvement stops being survival. It becomes expression. It becomes freedom. It becomes joy. And that is the life you are meant to live. Not a life of proving, a life of becoming. Not a life of striving, a life of unfolding. Not a life of fear, a life of truth. You are enough. You always were. You were simply too busy trying to earn what already belonged to you. And that ends here.